It had been a long day. Expeditions like this were normally tiring, but with the intense heat of the Egyptian sun bearing down on them, every minute felt like hours, and every hour a lifetime. Seth and Kayla were determined not to quit. They had traveled halfway around the world to get to this site, and they weren't about to let the elements stop them from uncovering the secrets they were searching for. The rumors had dated back centuries. Stories of a hidden tomb lost somewhere out in the desert. And as a likely pair of budding adventurer and an accomplished archaeologist, neither one of them could resist the chance to try and hunt down the tomb. If they could uncover it, they'd have one of the greatest archaeological finds of the century on their hands. Both Kayla and Seth would forever be remembered as the ones who discovered a supposedly unfindable ancient tomb. Having found their way to some ruins, the remains of a temple that had been all but razed to the ground, ravaged by the forces of time, Kayla and Seth had started searching for the tomb's entrance. The reason it had stayed uncovered for so long was the amount of sand that had covered it over the centuries, storms from the desert constantly rearranging the grains and piling on more. But right now, the skies were clear, and all they could do was keep digging, until, at long last, their shovels struck stone. Clearing a path to the entrance, Kayla flipped on a torch as she led her archaeologist friend down a flight of stairs carved into the stone. Seth followed her as they traversed further and further down, the air getting stale the deeper they went. The whole while there was a gnawing concern at the back of both of their minds that the rocky ceiling above could give way at any moment, trapping them both underground. But before each of them could voice their worry out loud, they arrived at a large stone door, left wide open about 20 meters beneath the surface. "Is this really it?" Kayla asked in disbelief. "It might be," Seth replied, the excitement in his voice like that of a kid on Christmas morning. Standing before them, beyond the threshold of the open entrance, was a chamber of stone. Its ceiling was secure, about 7 meters high, and the walls had been covered in hieroglyphics. Immediately, Seth shot over to the nearest wall, pulling a battered journal out of his bag to start to try to translate what had been written. While he was doing that, Kayla's attention fell over the rest of the room. For a tomb, there was a surprising lack of a sarcophagus, nor any other similar resting place for a body, with no signs that anyone else had already been here to remove one either. All there really was within was a few bowls, randomly placed around the chamber. Kayla's torchlight fell over one of the bowls, and she knelt down to take a closer look at its contents. It was filled with bread. They were all holding different foods: dates, figs, dried fish, and lentils. Of course, it wasn't uncommon for offerings to be left with the deceased during an ancient Egyptian burial, but strangely, none of these perishable foods seemed to have decayed in the centuries this tomb had been lost for. In fact, it all looked quite fresh, like it was still good enough to eat. Although the temptation to actually eat any of it quickly disappeared when Kayla reminded herself that, while it might not look it, the food down here had to have been hundreds, maybe thousands of years old, despite how perfectly preserved it appeared. "I think I've got something," Seth called enthusiastically. "There's definitely a story in these hieroglyphics." "You sure we're in the right place?" Kayla asked as she crossed the room to where her colleague was. "For a tomb, it doesn't seem like anyone was ever buried here." "I've got a theory," he replied. "This place might be more of a metaphorical tomb." "Right, that makes complete sense." Her sarcasm was unmistakable. "Look here," he said, pointing to one of the drawings on the wall as he spoke. It depicted a figure laying dead in a square space. "I think that's meant to be this room. Someone dies here, and then..." Seth's finger moved to another of the hieroglyphics, one that Kayla recognized. It showed a being with the body of a man and the head of a jackal, taking the dead figure down into the afterlife. This was Anubis, one of the ancient Egyptian gods associated with the afterlife. According to legends and other texts gathered from the pyramids in Giza, Anubis oversaw the process the Egyptians would perform to embalm their dead, preserving them for their trip to the next world. Anubis takes whoever they are to the judgment hall of the afterlife to be brought before, Seth explained, only to be cut off. "Osiris, god of fertility, the afterlife, and the dead," Kayla interrupted. She had already spotted the next being depicted in the glyphs, a tall figure with a distinctive headpiece, holding a symbolic crook and flail. "Oversaw resurrection, life, probably many other things." "Yeah, he was a god with a few different hats." Seth attempted to joke. Well, just the same one hat he's always shown wearing. Also, technically not a hat, the Atif was a type of crown, and so, hold on, Kayla interjected again. Didn't Osiris only bring the pharaohs in for judgment? Who was this person that died? I mean, the Egyptians never went to this amount of trouble for their average Joes, and the gods wouldn't pay them any mind unless they were important somehow. I'm not sure, Seth answered earnestly. At any rate, this could all just be a myth. That's why I think this tomb is metaphorical. It wasn't built to house a dead person, but to keep people believing. She finished his sentence for him. He then pointed out the next part of the glyphs, the dead figure arriving in the afterlife, carried by Anubis for judgment, and then handing an object to Osiris. Seth explained there was a certain myth surrounding Osiris and his resurrection, a story that told of all of his dead body parts being found except one. Without it, the god could not be fully resurrected. My theory is that is Osiris's missing appendage, as it were. Seth's face was red as he tried to keep his composure. After our mysterious friend handed it over, the hieroglyphs showed the nameless dead figure being taken from Anubis's hand by Osiris, who then placed them back in the room they had started in, the same chamber Seth and Kayla were standing in. It seemed they had been resurrected after death. Giving Osiris something that the god had wanted had earned this figure a free pass back to the land of the living. The glyphs also showed bowls of food around the tomb, like the ones Kayla had found dotted around the room. There was a type of aura drawn around the unknown figure now, almost like a personal shield. According to the drawings and symbols on the walls and Seth's hastily translation of their meaning, this was some form of protection granted by Osiris himself. The aura was meant to prevent the figure from harm, meaning they couldn't die again. However, the next portion of the story showed Anubis damaging the shield, possibly out of jealousy or spite, or perhaps defying Osiris, tampering with the natural order of things by protecting the figure from death. As well as causing damage to the aura of immortality that Osiris had bestowed upon them, Anubis drained the figure of all of their blood, which then caused them to go and do the same to others. Seth continued interpreting aloud. It would find people, drink their blood to sustain it, like, don't say it, Kayla sighed. I mean, it's a lot like a Egypt gave us mummies. They can't have another native monster from horror B movies, she interrupted. Well, maybe the legend found its way here somehow, or at least a more ancient Egyptian version of it. Her counterpart tried to reason. It looks like here the figure was far healthier after consuming blood. See how the aura around them is repaired now? But Seth, look at what they're standing on, Kayla whispered. One of the final images in the glyphs did display exactly what Seth had described, but beneath the feet of the figure, who now seemed replenished, was a mass of bodies, a pile of human corpses with one person standing at the very top. Who'd want to live forever anyway? Kayla muttered almost inaudibly. Hey, come and have a look at these. Leaning over, she picked up one of the food bowls from the floor, brimming with offerings of dates. She handed it to Seth, who marveled at how well preserved the food was. That's incredible, he remarked. This bowl looks like it's at least several thousand years old. I guess maybe 2500 BCE, but the dates... He picked one out of the bowl and sniffed it, put it back, and then did the same with another, making sure it wasn't a fluke. The conditions couldn't possibly have kept them fresh. So, how is it there are bowls of food all over this room that still look edible? She asked. I honestly have no, he began to say, but the sound of heavy, grinding stone interrupted Seth's sentence. Both he and Kayla looked in horror as they witnessed the entrance of the tomb being sealed, the heavy stone door dropping moments away from sealing them in. Seth, we need to run, Kayla urged, grabbing her bag. If we move now, we can get out of here before we get shut in. But, Seth protested, looking around the tomb, the glyph walls that had only just been discovered. Nobody would know that he and Kayla had found them if they ran now. He looked around the room, pondering for a moment, his eyes darting from a bowl of bread to the bowl of dates in his hands. We should at least take photos. No time. Our lives aren't worth proving what we found. Better to make it out than be buried alive, Kayla shouted, darting towards the entrance, ducking under the slowly lowering stone door. Seth, come on, she called from the other side. Despite her calls for him to move, her fellow explorer didn't follow. He just stood there, watching the door get lower and the only way back to the surface get narrower. By the time it had completely closed, Kayla's voice sounded so much further away that Seth could barely make out what she was saying. I'll get help! Find some way to get you out! Kayla screamed at the wall now separating her from the tomb. If you can hear me, Seth, ration the water in your bag. Take small sips every few hours. Seth already knew that the human body could survive around 3 weeks on just water and no food, and he trusted Kayla would have figured out how to get him out by then. He gave another glance to the food bowls scattered throughout the tomb. The idea of eating any of it, knowing how old it all potentially was, did turn his stomach a little. But if it came down to having to eat just a bite in order to survive a little longer, Seth was sure it looked fresh enough to still be edible. It couldn't hurt to take a bite, right? Over the next few days, Seth's focus was spent entirely on photographing and transcribing more of the hieroglyphics, occasionally stopping to take swigs of water from his canteen. If anything, it was more to combat how warm and stuffy it was being locked inside the stone chamber 20 meters underground. Meanwhile, unseen to Seth, outside Kayla was working tirelessly to try and figure out a way to get the door open. She had been searching for days for any sign or some kind of switch or lever that would unseal the chamber entrance. There had to be some mechanism that had caused the stone door to shut itself in the first place, but there was nothing around that looked like it fit that description. As much as she urged Seth to abandon his archaeological finders keeper's pride, Kayla was hesitant to make the long journey back across the desert to Cairo to get help. Anyone she brought to the dig site might claim the discovery as their own, and more to the point, the more time she spent traveling across the desert for help, the more time Seth would spend trapped, succumbing to gradual dehydration and starvation. Little was Kayla aware. It was already too late. Seth hadn't been observing her warning about managing the amounts of water he was drinking, and pretty soon, his canteen was empty. He cursed himself, annoyed for being so involved in his discovery that he'd now potentially put his own life at risk. But then he remembered the food bowls. Kneeling down, he picked up the nearest one, the same bowl with all the dates in it. Shaking his head at the thought, he put them back down again. The longer he waited, the more Seth began to worry that maybe Kayla had abandoned him. And if she had, then he was faced with the inevitability that he would die down here, lost and forgotten in an ancient tomb underground. He couldn't help but find something ironic about the whole thing. He was going to die in a tomb whose walls told the tale of a dead person being brought back to life. Maybe in a few hundred years, more archaeologists would find this buried room and think he was the one the tomb had been constructed for. Even trying to put an ironic spin on things wasn't enough to give Seth much peace when staring down the possibility he might not see the sun and walk above ground again. And getting closer to death is what made him want to avoid it, tempting him towards the bowls of food. Every time he tried to remind himself not to touch any of it, the pain in his stomach swelled, even greater, reminding him of his own hunger. With no clear view of the sky, Seth had little clue just how many days he'd been trapped in the tomb, although he was sure it was approaching the day 4 threshold. He couldn't survive much longer beyond that point without eating. As the days dragged on, he abandoned his research and note-taking. It was impossible to focus on translating hieroglyphics when he was in so much pain, aching from the heat and having no food or water, exhaustion causing him to pass out, his body trying to conserve its already limited reserves of energy. Eventually, Seth started trying to rationalize eating at least a date or two. The food hadn't decomposed or rotted at all. Even introducing air from outside when the tomb was first opened hadn't changed the state of any of it at all. Not the dates, nor the bread, or the fish. It still looked fresh and edible, and after God knows how long without eating, it was beginning to look all the more appealing to the starving archaeologist. Who cares if it had been there for 1,000 years or longer? If Seth didn't eat, he knew he wouldn't last much longer. The moment he chewed on the first date, feeling it pass down his esophagus, passing from his mouth to his stomach, Seth immediately regretted giving in to his need to eat. His mouth instantly went dry, far worse than it had been after this long without water. It was like the tiny piece of fruit had pulled all the saliva from his mouth. Seth tried to scream in panic, only to release a hoarse, dry-throated grasp as he felt his tongue shriveling up with his mouth and throat until it felt like the skin of a drum. But it didn't stop there. It only got worse. Seth stared in horror at his own arms, the blue veins that ran underneath his skin rapidly draining away. His forearms and biceps shrunk, muscle and sinew shriveling like his body had been left in a water evaporator. All the while, the pain of having his entire physical form being reshaped was pure agony. The dehydration of his mouth meant Seth still couldn't scream, only dropped to the ground as he felt the same thing happening to his legs. every drop of moisture in his body. Every fluid from water to blood, saliva, and even urine was drying out, leaving Seth as little more than a dusty, desiccated husk. Before his own eyes, he could only watch as his skin lost its pigment, drying into a thin, leathery texture, drained of its original color as his blood stopped flowing. Outside, Kayla had been coming back to the tomb's sealed door every day and would stay until the late hours of the evening. She tried digging down from the surface to reach the chamber where Seth had been trapped, but it was too far underground. There was no sign of any way to move or reopen the stone door. That is, until she heard the heavy grinding of it opening on its own. Kayla raced down the steps towards the tomb. It had been 5 whole days since she and Seth got separated, and he'd need food and medical attention. Sprinting into the dark tunnel, she arrived just in time to see the entrance reopening, expecting to see Seth standing on the other side as the stone door lifted. What she saw instead was a nightmare. It looked like a corpse, an ancient and decomposing dead body. Kayla had seen plenty entombed in sarcophagi on her many travels exploring ancient ruins around the world, but she had never seen one standing up. It was still breathing, a wheezing, raspy sound escaping its mouth. Its skin looked almost brittle, as if it was stretched too thin, almost see-through enough to show off the bones underneath. The upright corpse's face was all wrong, too. Sunken cheeks and eye sockets deeper than they should have been. It looked so different that it wasn't until Kayla shone her flashlight on its drained face that she recognized who it was. Seth. He lunged at her, immediately racing towards her, snarling with his dry, desiccated mouth. Kayla turned and ran as he came after her, bony fingers swiping at her clothes. Her flashlight gripped in her hand was all but useless as she sprinted back the way she'd come, swinging back and forth in her arm, barely illuminating much of the cavern that led to the tomb. The whole while she was running from it, she could hear the wheezing behind of Seth behind her, terrified of whatever he had become and why he was chasing her. Then she saw it, the stairs, her one shot at getting out and getting away. If she could make it to the surface, she could put some more distance between herself and the drained, dehydrated corpse. All she had to do was make it up. The last step. She had just made it when she felt the shriveling hand grip her ankle, tripping her over. Falling face first in the sand, Kayla scrabbled at the loose grains, trying to pull herself away as her body was dragged back down onto the stone stairs. She felt a searing pain and screamed into the empty desert as the corpse's fingers dug into her neck, its leathery, dry skin against hers. Eventually, the screaming stopped, replaced with a dry, hoarse gasping, and then silence, as Seth drained her body of her blood along with the rest. Pulling Kayla's body by her ankle, Seth dragged whatever was left of her back down towards the tomb, SCP-3359, to feed on what was left. Now go and check out SCP-1176, Why Everyone Wants to Eat This Corpse, for even more mysterious mummified madness. Or if ancient temples are more your thing, then why not take a visit to SCP-001, God's Blind Spot, and uncover some sinister secrets with some anomalous technology.